So some 5 months ago in our staff meeting when we were discussing the eclipse, we knew exactly where we were going to turn. Partially because Alan came and was nice enough to present during our Yom Kippur service. He offered reflections and he talked a little bit and already started getting us excited about the eclipse at that point, although he did say there's only a quarter chance that it would be sunny. So hopefully we'll prove them wrong here, the gods of the weather. It was without a doubt that we would get Alan, if he was willing, to be able to present, and we reached out to them, and he right away said yes. We had no idea his schedule would be as busy as it is. Not only is his work, and he's been doing work taking pictures of the sun and moon and stars for, a very long time. I'll let him share his story. But his work is at the Birchfield Penny as we speak. And we are apparently the sixth and final event of this past week, maybe, or the past couple of weeks. So we are very lucky because he is in very high demand. The solar eclipse comes, and everyone in Buffalo knows exactly who they're going to turn to, and Alan is one of the key people. And so we are very blessed. Alan actually helped form our congregation. He was part of all the different discussions that went into forming what it was, and he had been, we'd known each other since I arrived in Buffalo in 2008, because he was part of that process as well. What we're going to do is we're going to set up our screen here so we can see his wonderful pictures. We'll probably turn down the lights as well so you can really get a clear picture. And just give us a couple of minutes to get set.
Can you hear me okay? Good. I'm going to do this presentation sitting down, because that way I won't block whoever is standing, or whoever I'm standing in front of. And I would suggest, if you want to, just take a minute and make sure that you can see well. This is not an adult movie, so you don't have to sit with a lot of space between you, and you can coalesce in the center and get a good view. It's a very visual presentation. It's a ton of slides, but I'll go through them quickly. And we should have time for questions at the end, and if not, or not enough time for all questions, feel free to grab me at ONEC and we can talk further. I'm gonna actually. Okay, is that good? Okay. So we've all got our eyes and minds on the sun and preparing for 9 days away and where we're going to be and what we're going to do. I'm going to take you through a couple of journeys, beginning with a journey about what I do and what I've done for the past 20 or 30 years. It's not my profession, it's my avocation. I'm a greeting card publisher, some of you may know that. And I am an amateur or citizen astronomer. So this is the view from my backyard in downtown Buffalo. Something to bear in mind as you start thinking about the sun and what are we going to see on April 8th. If you hold your hand in front of you like that, the sun is about the size of the pinky nail on your smallest finger. It's quite small to our vantage point. And another way to think about it is its angular size, which we won't talk too much about, but you know that a circle has 360 degrees. So there are 180 degrees from horizon to horizon. And the sun subtends 1/2 of a degree in diameter. So you could fit 360 suns edge to edge from sunrise to sunset, from one side to the other. So this is the idealized view from my backyard. This is the real view from my backyard. And we have lots of eclipses visible from my backyard. Very often an eclipse of an electrical transformer, eclipse of satellite disks, and eclipses of cables, including even some landline telephone cables in addition to all the cable TV and power lines. We still have a landline. This picture was taken in January a number of years ago, showing what it's like to try and take pictures of the sun from my backyard much of the year. That is a power cord, and that gives you a sense of the size of the sun compared to the thickness of a Niagara Mohawk or National Grid power line. So we have a lot of issues with being able to do astronomy in Buffalo and being able to enjoy the heavens. This is one of them. This is the beginning of a lunar eclipse quite a few years ago, where clouds were draping the whole thing like a thin veil. And this is what we can imagine is going to be like during the solar eclipse on April 8th. This is the moon and Mars making a beautiful close conjunction, and I got a quick peek of it through a cloud break. We call these sucker holes. These are what encourage you to set up your telescope when in actuality, as soon as you get it set up, you can no longer see what you are going to look at. And then we have this, which this is my observatory in my backyard at the beginning of the season. This is mid-season. Anybody seen this from their backyard? I bet you have. But nonetheless, I've had a lot of chance to take pictures of things in the sky. And all of the things that I take pictures of in the city of Buffalo, because it's got a lot of background light, I can't take pictures of dim things. I can't really take pictures of stars. Everything I take a picture of is lit by the sun. So the sun's behind everything I do. And if you look carefully at this picture, I've got a laser pointer here, you can see the sun's influence, not just lighting Saturn brightly, but look at the shadows of the rings, the disk of the planet against the rings, just like we see shadows on Earth. And all of the objects and the beautiful reading that the rabbi did, Jupiter and its moon Io, and the mysterious planet Venus enshrouded in toxic clouds, and of course Mars. All of these are lit by the sun, and all are visible from a backyard in downtown Buffalo. I was deeply into taking pictures of the moon at one point in time. With even a small telescope, you can get very close in and see incredible detail on the surface of the moon. This is an image I love. I've taken this picture many times over the years, and it really is a great discussion of the sun and the moon. The sun is lighting the brightly lit part of it, and Earth is lighting the dimly lit part. That is called earth shine. It's the light bouncing off the Earth. It's illuminating the dark side of the moon. The thing that amazes me about this picture is something that I was thinking of while we were doing silent prayer. I was looking at the candles right in front of me, and I defocused my eyes, and I had a fabulous view of 3 candles, just like there were 3 candles there. It's just crazy vivid. In this image, your eye can see the bright sunlit part of the moon and the earthlit part at the same time, no problem. You probably noticed it in March. You'll certainly notice it in April when this first crescent moon is up high in the sky and just staggering as you drive home from your afternoon, or it's visible during the daylight, so you see it on the way home from work or Wegmans or wherever you've been. But try and take a picture of this. The only way to do it is with a double exposure. You don't have enough dynamic range, and even your best camera, to properly illuminate both of these things in the same exposure. Our eyes are marvelous. And then there's the beast itself, our beautiful sun, filled with activity. There'll be quite a few pictures of this moving forward. I don't know, did you know that the sun rotates? The sun rotates in 21 days, and this was a marvelous giant sunspot that was visible in 2014. It was the biggest sunspot that the sun had presented since 1947. So it was quite stunning, and there were 3 clear days in the middle of March, in middle of October, to be able to view this as it rotated across the disk of the sun. These are some of my instruments. I have a telescope problem, like a lot of people have various problems. Some people have motorcycle problems. A lot of musicians have guitar problems. This is my illness, which is not such a bad thing. There are a wonderful assortment of telescopes. Each one does different things. This is the tiniest one of all of them. It's a 92 millimeter telescope. It's 14 inches long and it weighs 6 pounds, and it is my primary solar telescope. Here it is mounted on top of the big one. And here I am in my backyard under my beautiful observing cloth made by my wife, Donna Massimo, who many of you may know. And if you don't know, she was for many years taught costume at the University of Buffalo and knows better than anyone that we all look best in silver lame. This is my solar observing kit. It fits in a 21-inch Halliburton case, and it's got everything for taking pictures of the sun and visually observing the sun, which I always try and do before I get started. This is one of my solar cameras. It's very tiny. It's a webcam, and it takes streaming imagery, and we'll see what it looks like to the image through that camera in a bit. And it allows me to travel to star parties and share the view through Little Big Man with people in the audience. This is me taking a trip to the shores of Lake Erie. In the background, you might just be able to see the wind turbines from downtown waterfront. I'm down in Wanaka, New York, pointing the telescope at the shores of Lake Erie, actually the edge of Lake Erie, and the sun was disappearing into it, and you can see that it's partly eclipsed. But what was amazing about this day is the sun was having a partial solar eclipse while active region 2192 is still on the disk. And it's amazing that I can remember the name of that active region because I can't remember my phone number. But that is the largest active region since 1947. It was very memorable. And that and a solar eclipse happened the same week. Here it is in the general wavelengths of white light. This is the detail you would see on the sun with a pair of solar eclipse glasses. And if we have a sunspot that big, you'll see it clearly as well. I was able to travel to Mount Wilson for this event, the transit of Venus across the sun. Also big enough that you can see it with a pair of solar eclipse glasses. That black spot is visible. And there's a funny little spot down here, which is the International Space Station. That is visible as a silhouette in front of the sun from time to time. I photographed it a number of times. This one was pretty successful. There's quite a bit of detail there, including a docked spaceship from a U.S. mission that is attached. And this is the same picture taken 2 years earlier. And what you can notice with this is that the sun's activity cycles in an 11-year cycle between solar minimum and solar maximum, when we're on the way to solar maximum. But look at the difference in activity on the sun. Same space station, but quite a bit different activity level. So here's a quick lesson on the sun and what we can see. On the right is the photosphere. And that's what we see through our solar eclipse glasses and through a very simple white light filter. With that, you can see the beautiful detail in sunspots. On the left is the view through a hydrogen alpha filter, which captures a band in the very deep end of the red spectrum where you can see prominences and the whirls and swirls of the chromosphere and filaments. It's really a spectacular view. And even within the chromosphere, there are different levels. On the right, the red view in hydrogen alpha, and on the left, the ultraviolet light wavelength of calcium K line. Both chromosphere, different heights off of the sun's surface. These are what we call white light filters. They're simple to make, inexpensive. I have one for each of my scopes, and they're basically a solar eclipse glasses, but made to fit a telescope. And it allows you a safe view at the sun through a telescope. It's the only way you can look through optical aid at the sun. Very important to know that, because you can do a lot of damage very quickly that you won't feel trying to look at the sun through binoculars or a telescope if you don't have a safe filter on the front. A couple of views of the sun in white light with dramatic sunspot activity. So that 10-inch telescope that I have, the biggest one that I have, is quite rare. There are 30 of them that were made. It's a brilliant instrument. And this is what the sun looks like, the surface of the sun, on a good day from my backyard in Buffalo. And you can see movement. The movement you're seeing is the atmosphere, our atmosphere and Earth, which is the filter that I can't do anything about. And it makes the image bloat and twirl and just be different at each moment. So imagine trying to use a camera to take a picture of this. When do you hit the shutter button? You'd have to have very good luck to hit the shutter button when it's sharp. But I use a different technique, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a second, to create a sharp image. Here's the parts of Little Big Man set up to go for hydrogen alpha. In hydrogen alpha, you see so much more. And these things, these dark eyebrow-shaped things, are filaments when they're at the edge of the sun. We call them prominences. Here's a little bit of a walk on the surface of the sun through my smallest telescope. And you see all the whirls and swirls of the chromosphere, little bits of active regions, bright white, filaments in dark shapes. You can see how this can become addicting. It's just spectacular stuff to see. So a quick journey through the last 15 years or so of my life, taking pictures of the sun on most clear days. The images all begin black and white. I generally colorize them to create a feeling, a mood, a moment which is different than the moment from yesterday. All of these taken in hydrogen alpha. You can see too, something I'll show you in a minute, the tonality of the chromosphere is inverted in these images. So it's a negative instead of a positive. And what that lets you see is the incredible depth in the active regions, which doesn't show in the same way in the positive form. Some of these are taken during solar minimum when there was nothing going on. In some of these years in solar minimum, almost 280, 290 days of the year have no sunspot visible. This year, there's not been a day without a sunspot, just to give you a sense. And last year, I don't believe there was a single day without a sunspot. We're now moving more toward solar maximum. increased activity, and this was the last image I took last year in the fall. The sun just filled with stuff. The edge, where the prominences are, is a story in itself, and I do a lot of picture taking of prominences because they're incredibly beautiful. These are higher power images. Here's a little view through. Actually, not through. This is how I work. This is a picture of my laptop screen as I'm capturing images. And again, you can see the bloat of the atmosphere. But it's wonderful because I can focus real time looking at the laptop underneath my silver lame cloth, which gives me enough darkness to be able to work. And this is the image that resulted from that data. This is a prominence that was a remainder from an X-class solar flare, the highest energy type of flare. So just a little bit of a talk about how I make these pictures. I won't go into it in depth. That's what I've been doing this past month. I gave 6 talks this past month, from Houston to Kalamazoo to the Birchfield Center. This is the last one, and it's not an imaging talk, so I'm just going to show this to you quickly. But if you look, you can see that, again, that movement. Now imagine I try and stop this. This is streaming video. Imagine I'm using a camera and I try and click the shutter just at the moment that it's sharp. So you can see, it's like really hard. But if you have a video camera and you take video, you take a lot of frames. And if you could go through those frames using a computer program and pick the sharpest ones, and just choose the sharpest ones and average them together, you have a technique called lucky imaging. And that's what allows amateurs to be able to capture images of a quality that observatories couldn't do 10 years earlier. And that's the processed result of taking about 300 of the sharpest frames and processing them. Now, the prominence part of this image is much dimmer, so it needs a much higher, longer exposure to be seen. This is the prominence image, and then the two of them are combined. The foreground, the chromosphere has been inverted here, so you can see this incredible chasm, looks like a crevasse. And of course, a person moonwalking on the edge of the sun. I just made this today. I've given a talk 6 times this month without having a diagram of what happens during an eclipse. I thought you might like to see this. So the foreground part, this is the solar eclipse, when the moon is in between the sun and the earth, and it casts a very tiny shadow, which is visible in only a small part of the earth, and it moves as the moon moves during that day. It's the reason that solar eclipses are much harder to see, because the shadow is smaller. The other side is showing a lunar eclipse, where the moon passes behind the earth and dips into the earth's shadow, which is lit red from all of the sunrises and sunsets around the edge of the earth, which is the reason that they call it the blood moon. Although in reality, we never know what color red it's going to be. It's different every time. Lunar eclipses are much easier to see. They usually happen every year or two, sometimes twice in the same year. And everybody who is in the nighttime side of the moon during a lunar eclipse is able to see it. This was the beginning of a lunar eclipse in 2022 with, you guessed it, clouds. But the clouds gave way some. And by the time this is partial, and by the time it was total, we had a really nice view of the moon in eclipse. And if I enlarge that image, I don't know if you can see this from where you're sitting, but that star, usually you can't see stars at the time of the full moon. But when it's in the Earth's shadow, you can. And this star is a double star. There are 2 of them there. If you look closely, the big bright one is further out, but right at the disk, the edge of the disk of the moon, is a tiny little companion to that star. So back to the solar eclipse. The solar eclipse has both an umbra and a penumbra. And in the penumbra, you can see a partial eclipse. But we are going to be in the umbra, and we are going to have a total eclipse, which is a completely different experience. This was a partial eclipse that I took from the rooftop of my office building in 2021, in the midst of the pandemic. And this will just, if you're thinking of taking pictures of the totality, this is what the size of the sun looks like on a 35 millimeter frame with a 100 millimeter lens. And this is what it looks like with a 450 millimeter lens. The sun rose from the horizon with the eclipse in process. It was not a total eclipse. So this is the only solar eclipse I've ever seen in totality is in Kentucky. And this is where I got to experience what everyone says, which is 100% total eclipse is about as different from a 99% eclipse as a 99%, that's not what they say. They say a 99% solar eclipse is more like a 20% solar eclipse than it is a total eclipse. Totality is where it's at. This is what the sun looked like the day of the eclipse in Kentucky. Here there were some nice prominences happening that day too. Gives you a sense of how big that is with that earth in there. And this is what the sky looked like when we got out. And this was a kind of crazy experience, and my most emotional part of the day. It looked like we weren't going to see it. And all the people we were with, I was a guest, and Donna was with me, a guest of the Louisville Astronomical Society. And we thought we were going to pack up and go somewhere where it was going to be clear, maybe 30 miles away. But I had polar aligned for 2 nights, and I was dead nuts polar aligned, which means that I could put the sun in my telescope and it would not move for a month because I was tracking it so accurately. I was not going to pack up and move. I just couldn't do it. And I looked at these clouds and I just said, I'm not going to see it. And then what happened, as totality got closer, the weather changed, and the 97 degree temperature and about 90% humidity changed dramatically. And the clouds disappeared like somebody took a balloon and opened it up, and they went psst, and the clouds just disappeared. And it was such an amazing thing when I realized that we were going to see it. I burst into tears. And that was the most emotional part of it for me. And I'll just tell you that if we get to see this, it's an incredibly emotional experience. Your body will respond. Your brain will respond. In the way the animals, the insects, and the birds respond, it's a change that is, I don't know how to describe it other than it is the most powerful natural phenomenon I've ever seen. So this is a fun picture. The sun is almost completely covered up, and you can see the NASA plane that was following the path of totality flying overhead. It was silent except for that. Everyone was waiting for totality. And that funny little half moon over there, you know how when you take a picture with the sun in it with your iPhone, you get these nasty reflections in the picture? Look at the reflection, how it's mimicking the eclipse. This was my laptop screen capturing the partial phase of the eclipse with a safe solar filter on it. And this is a little bit of a doctored picture because you can't see the moon through your safe solar filter. But this is what's happening. And the moon is going to enter from the west and go to the east, which is the way the moon moves. This is the famous colander trick. If you have an old aluminum colander with round holes, it will create a little pinhole camera and cast shadows of what's going on in the sun above. The leaves will do this too, but unfortunately we won't have leaves to see. And this is totality. And when totality happens, well, let me describe to you 20 seconds before totality. I'm looking at it on my computer screen, and there's the thinnest fingernail clipping of a sun left showing. And I said, I've got to be able to look at it. And I turned over my shoulder. I was sitting much like this in front of my laptop. I turned and I looked at the sun, and I could not look at it at all. It looked just as it does on the middle of the day. It was you couldn't look at it. And then 15 seconds later, everybody says, oh my God. And they take their eclipse glasses off, which is what you do because you don't need eclipse glasses during totality. And for 3 minutes and 40 seconds on April 8th, you will be able to look at this. And you will see the corona. Here you only see a part of it, but the corona extends maybe 5 or 6 or 7 sun diameters on all sides out into the sky. You'll see some pictures that are taken where people sharpen this corona and turn it into a very granular sort of thing. People like to do that. It's not really my thing. I did it to this image just to show it, but you'll have your own experience, and you can snap a picture if you want. This is what happens right after. The picture on the left is about 3 seconds after totality, maybe slightly longer, and the picture on the right is 2 seconds after that. And at that point, I had to quickly cover the telescope. Does everybody have a pair of these at this point? Yeah. Yay. They're giving them out. All the libraries are giving them out. I think they're $1.99 at Wegmans. You really want to have them. They will let you look at a very small sun, but you'll be able to watch the partial phases of the eclipse. And of course, they should have this little marking on them that they're ISO certified. If you can see anything looking at a bright light bulb, they're not good. You shouldn't be able to see anything, but you can test them on the sun and see what the sun looks like if you get a sunny afternoon. You don't have to wait for the eclipse. As the rabbi mentioned, I have a show up with my friend Charles Birchfield at the Birchfield Center, who Charles did a lot of drawings and paintings and watercolors of nature. He loved the sun and the moon, and I was very deeply honored to be asked to contribute images to this show called Total Solar Eclipse and Astral Visions, works by Charles Birchfield and Alan Friedman. But this is what I love to do the best, and I'm sad that I haven't gotten to do it in the last 4 years, and I'm thrilled that we'll be able to get out and do this again, which is let perfect strangers come up and look through Little Big Man to see the universe for themselves. I put this picture in here from my buddy Mike Frisch. I used to keep it in my talk all the time, and then I kind of cut it out because I didn't want it to be political, but our instruments are what we do to combat the lack of knowledge, the telling of untruths, the unfaithfulness to the truth. So, one last picture. This is today's cloud prediction. I don't know if any of you are looking at this, and I do not want to put a kinahara on this. But as of today, with whatever quality forecast can be, Western New York is about the best place in the country for a 9-day forecast for weather for the eclipse. What is yellow on this map is clarity, and what is blue is cloud cover. So we're not going to talk about it. It's too early to predict, but there is a possibility that we'll be lucky. If you've got nothing to do on a rainy day, visit my website. It's avertedimagination.com. And with that, we're moving on to the next part of our service. Does anybody have a question?
I do have a question. The pictures of the space station, I may not have heard it. It couldn't have been on the sun, right?
No, it's silhouetted. It's silhouetted in front of the sun. It travels about 200 miles above the Earth.
Okay.
And it makes these narrow paths of visibility. Have you seen it at night, the space station? It's incredible. It's so big and bright, but it passes in front of the sun and the moon from time to time. And I have an astronomy friend who's devoted to following heavens above to know. It's a website that predicts these things. And it passes in front of the sun, takes 2/5 of a second. So you got to do some advanced planning, and the path of travel is about 1,000 yards wide. So you got to be in the right place with a streaming camera. I've done some poorer jobs, but those came out well. Yes.
The flares that you showed, the solar flares, about how many miles out do they?
Well, there was only one picture of a solar flare. Those things at the edge of the sun are called solar prominences, and they are very balanced outcroppings of hydrogen plasma, usually going in and out from an active region in a loop-shaped form. But because they happen front to back and side to side, they're not always arched. Sometimes we see them foreshortened. They can be tremendously big. That big one that I showed, the first very massive one, I think that one was about 400,000 miles long. So the distance from the Earth to the moon and most of the way back again. They can be tremendously big. If you were to put suns in front of moons in front of, if you were to take Earth and make it the right size circle, if it could be visible at in the same place in space as the sun, you could fit 109 Earths across the disk of the sun. And if you slice the sun open like a cassava melon, you could fit 1 million Earths inside of it. It's really big. Yeah.
If you wanted to take a picture of the eclipse, what would we have to do?
Well, a little bit of magnification is going to be helpful. Your iPhone is a 28 millimeter lens. So you might even get some foreground or horizon at that focal length. I'm not sure. I don't think it's quite enough to do that. So you probably would be best using a camera with something 50 millimeters or bigger. But there's all kinds of ways. There's this guy, Fred Espenak, who's a former NASA scientist. He was in Buffalo in February speaking at the Birchfield. He's fabulous. He's called Mr. Eclipse. Just Google Mr. Eclipse and he will tell you more than you'll ever want to know about taking a picture of an eclipse. He's taken pictures of them for 40 years. Yeah, Jill.
I've heard that if you live in a place where street lights come on when it's dark, that you may not be able to see anything. So you need to go somewhere away from where those lights are.
I don't think that's really going to be the case. I think streetlights might come on. I wouldn't like look at the sun with a street light there. So, you want some sky, but it's not going to bother you that much. It gets dark, but it gets dusk-like dark. You want to be sure the sun is going to be, it's going to be 2 hours and 20 minutes past midpoint in the sky. It happens at the totality, I believe, begins at 3:18. But we're in daylight savings time. So it's where the sun would be in normal time at 2:18. If we get a sunny day before that, take a look at that position in the sky. It'll only be higher. It's going to be at 45 degrees altitude. Don't be under a tree, but it's going to be hard to miss. It's going to be nice and high. So think about where you're going to be, but also think about how many people will be with you. Because if we continue to be the best place in the country to see the eclipse, a lot of people get in the car the last minute and drive to that place. So it could be as packed as people are saying.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned about the animals. What happens to birds and the insects during an eclipse?
What happens to what?
The animals. You mentioned that the animals.
Well, they respond. They feel it. They say the insects start chirping. The birds, behave as they do at dusk. It's so different, so odd for so many reasons. The light is very strange. The color of the light, the shadows that are cast are strange. So it's strange in a wonderful kind of way. If you're around 500,000 people, it's going to be hard to hear the animals making any kind of noises, but it is just it will get colder. It's going to get colder here. It's supposed to be 50 degrees possibly that day, but it's going to go down. It's going to drop 10, 15 to 20 degrees. So you'll feel that. Yeah, quickly. Quickly, yes.
Is there a website that will show the position of the sun at that time?
The position of the sun at that, well, I'm sure there are. I mean, there's so many websites devoted to it, but I mean, the sun's like, if your house is built, if you know where south is in your house, and you look due south, the sun is going to be 2 hours and 20 minutes past due south on its way down, 45 degrees up in the sky, which is higher than it sounds. I mean, it's halfway up, but make your arm go 45 degrees. It's going to be up there. It never gets that high up. So it's pretty high. I mean, I take really good pictures. It's funny, the fall lasts much longer than the spring in Buffalo. I never take pictures of the sun before April, but I'm taking a lot of pictures of the sun the second week in September, which is basically the sun is in the same place as it is the second week in September. You know, where are we going to be? 2 weeks past the spring equinox. So imagine 2 weeks before the autumnal equinox. Sun's pretty high. Don't get behind a tree to your south, but just take a compass with you so you know what's south. It'll be in the southwest. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, where will you be?
You know, I haven't decided yet. I hear there's something going on here. My building was going to rent the rooftop to a group for the eclipse, but that didn't happen. So I have the opportunity to use the roof of my office building with just a few people if I want. But I may just stay in the backyard. I'm pretty sure I can see it well from the backyard. And if you're going to try and take pictures of this, you need your wits about you. 3 minutes and whatever it is, 40 seconds goes by fast. And I would encourage you, if you're a photographer or have an interest in photography, but have never seen a total eclipse, do not set any expectations and do not maybe leave the camera inside. The next day, there will be 500,000 marvelous pictures that will look just like what you saw, but you might not see it if you're stuck behind a camera and realize, I didn't set the ISO to the right, oh my God, and they know. It can be very stressful. Yeah.
Is there, when it's during the total eclipse, can you use binoculars to look at it toward the sun or not? Or that's...
If you don't have a safe solar filter in front, absolutely not. And the reason for that is, you think of how uncomfortable it is to look at the sun at any time of day. Even when you think you can look at it when it's at the horizon, if you look at it for any multiple of seconds, you'll feel the heat in your eye and your brain tells you this is not good. So your eye with the sun out is probably somewhere around 1 millimeter open. Your pupils are probably dilated down to about 1 millimeter. Your binoculars are 50 millimeters, something like that. So 50 times the aperture, which is the square of 50 of the amount of energy that you're allowing in your eye, focused to a pinpoint. That pinpoint will permanently damage your retina before you can feel a thing. There are not much in the way of pain sensors in the back of the eye. So definitely not. Yes? Yeah.
An online article in Time Magazine today said you could hold the glasses in front of your camera lens or scotch tape it to your camera lens. Is that
Yeah. Yeah, you could certainly do that. I find it challenging to get the iPhone to focus properly, but if you have kids around you, give it to them and let them do it. Because they are masters at using an iPhone through a telescope, through anything. They're really good. You look at it, let the kids take the pictures. But yes, you can do that. Good. Well, thank you so much. It's so great to see everybody again.
I feel like we need like a Shekianu moment. That was so beautiful. Alan, your presentation was amazing, and I think we're all much more excited. I was excited when you gave your presentation in September for this, but I'm even more excited now. So thank you, not just for our community, but for the entire Western New York region, and also all the, like, even going down to Kentucky. What a far reach! The fact you have one of 9 of these telescopes. Incredible. So keep collecting and keep inspiring others. If you were here on High Holidays, you might have noticed that Alan said it's Saturn, which brings kids to and adults to astronomy. It was what Alan fell in love with, and I talked to my son Boaz, and he said it was the same thing. It's Saturn is so very captivating.